Hello and welcome back to the Transfer Flow. And on today's episode, we are rebuilding Arsenal after another disappointing second place finish. How are the Gunners approaching this summer with a midfield rebuild, as well as targeting big signings at left wing, striker, and potentially at attacking midfield? We run through all the major rumours, including running the rule over Victor Gyokeres, Rodrygo, Eze, Madueke, Akliouche, and many, many more. That's all on today's episode of the Transfer Flow. Okay, so we are back from holiday. I'm back. Ted Knutson, you are back from holiday. You must be raring to go. Unfortunately, it seems like our topic for today, Arsenal, they are raring to go as well. They have suddenly woken up just in time for us to get into this rebuild. How are you, Ted?
I'm good. I think that Arsenal have the shit together right now. I think just not trying to spoil the rest of the pod, but I think they're not always excited about what's available to them, but they want to get
Yeah.
them in early so that they're ready for preseason and tactical training with Arteta, and they can hit the ground running, which with what I think is a fairly tricky start to their season.
Yeah. They start off with United away, right? And they've got Liverpool, they've got City, like very early on. It is a rough start to the season, but perhaps that's why they've maybe accelerated some moves. So over the last week, we've seen Kepa come through the door as the backup goalkeeper, replacing Neto. We've seen Zubimendi finally confirmed after months and months of, is this actually going to happen? It also seems like Christian Nørgaard is going to get done as well. They're looking at a move for Christian Mosquera from Valencia. And of course, that's without even getting to the forward line, which we will save for later, because I guess that is where people are most excited. Tons of guys out the door as well, Ted. So, I mean, look, we've got Neto out, Tierney's gone, Tomiyasu, that contract has been cut short. Sterling obviously gone, Jorginho, Partey. The team is in quite a settled place, and yet circumstances forced Arsenal into a considerable midfield rebuild this summer, right?
Yeah, so we knew that midfield was going to happen. We knew that Jorginho was probably going to go. The El Neni thing happened a couple of years ago. The midfield's been fine, right? And for
Yeah.
one season, it was good, but it hasn't been like super elite. You've got basically two of three parts that operate at a really high level most of the time.
Mhm.
Odegaard was not awesome this year, probably due to one of two things. Like, he had some injury issues. He has a good partnership with Saka, who also had injury issues. And then allegedly he may have had some sleep issues from raising newborn children, but we don't
Yeah.
know about that. That's just rumor. So knowing that they needed to rebuild, the question was, how do you retool that midfield with players that have to have a very high technical skill capability, but also that need to be pretty dynamic? And they landed on another Basque player who had
Mm.
been rumored as a target for Liverpool last year and decided not to go. And then a player that has been a leader at Brentford, and they sort of looked at as another good pair of hands, effectively, or feet, if you will, as a short term replacement for probably a couple seasons in Christian Nørgaard.
Mm-hmm. And I think, with Nørgaard, look, we don't want to talk about Thomas Partey today for many, many reasons, but bringing in Nørgaard is probably about the same price in the end as re-upping somebody who's on big wages. He's going to be on decent wages, and it's something like a 10 million fee. These moves, and I think this will be a trend as we talk about the whole summer that Arsenal seem to be planning. It's low downside win now, as far as possible, it seems, right? Like Nørgaard is somebody who they know they can trust. He's going to be fine. Maybe you have some questions about the trending in some of his numbers. His defensive output is going down, and also, he's more of a retention passer than a great progressive passer, right? But generally speaking, it feels like they're targeting peak age guys who are known quantities.
Yeah, so I think that they view themselves as having enough good parts, or elite parts, not even good, right? So like enough elite parts in the squad, in Bukayo Saka, in Saliba, in Raya has been an excellent shot stopper. Maybe
Yeah.
not the very best in the Premier League, but they're super happy with him. And then Odegaard also, I think they're really happy with as well. We'll get to the academy. I think that actually deserves a note, but I think that they have to be incredibly excited with what they've seen the last couple of years coming through there too. So looking at that combination of parts, the question then becomes like, how do you pilot this to whatever your best finishes this year and next year. But then how do you also make sure that like you are building a long-term reign where you can compete at the top of the Premier League and in multiple competitions for trophies? And I think that this is the first year that we have really seen them kind of make very careful choices around this. If everybody stays healthy, that's great. But Calafiori had a very bumpy first year. Timber has had a very bumpy 2 years, even though they love how good those guys are. Ben White also had like a pretty long injury period last year. Like injuries were really the story for last season for them. If they get guys healthy, if they stay healthy, now how do we make sure that we can kick on across all these competitions? If they don't stay healthy, then how do we minimize our fall and make sure that we stay in that Champions League loop?
So I guess that everything as well that we're talking about this summer, we will talk a little bit about the young players coming through, but all the transfers as well have to be balanced with the fact that Arsenal expect to have a pretty expensive summer just with re-upping contracts, right?
Yeah.
Kim produced this document for us
in the Transfer Flow newsletter, which you should be subscribing to.
All the players on the books, market value, age, years remaining on contract. And when you look down the list, there are tons of people on 1 or 2 years. I mean, you've got Saliba, obviously, Saka, Ben White, David Raya, Declan Rice, Nwaneri, who currently they're negotiating with, Martinelli. All these guys are on 1 or 2 years. And Arsenal will want to nail down as many of these as possible. And so everything that they do this summer, especially offering wages to new guys and stuff, has to be very carefully balanced because Arsenal the last few years have been actually slightly behind where you'd expect them to be, right? For a title challenger, their wage bill has not been as extreme as you would expect. It feels like this summer is the summer that changes.
Well, and it's a rich person's problem. And we have like 3 elite players that we want to maintain through like the bulk of their 20s, possibly into age 30. Like, how do we afford that? Well, Saka's almost certainly not going to go anywhere. Like he's been there the whole time. He loves it there. Like he knows that he's adored. I think that one is very reasonable. They almost have an issue with Saliba in that he is actually so good that people that can compete with Arsenal on wages or even best them have been looking over there. And when Real Madrid start coming towards you, they have a history of prying players out of teams with huge wage packets and all the glitz and the glamour of potentially winning a Champions League title. Arsenal on the men's side do not have those. They do on the women's side. And so, I think that Saliba is the one that you have to worry about. And I think that there are a lot of contracts to be signed and a lot of re-ups that need to happen. But I think it's a good place to be is what it's regarded as. It's not highly dysfunctional. And so when you look at it as that, like the opposite of Manchester United, and you say the wages are like not too dissimilar, but you can achieve more here now for your next contract at Arsenal than you could at United for the time being. It's going to be a comfortable place for guys to stay and re-up. And I think they've done a pretty good job, even up to this point, of giving themselves what we would call optionality as a management team. If we needed to sell some guys on to raise some funds, if we cratered and something happened, we're okay. But if we get rid of all of these players that are sort of below Arsenal standard in performance, then we get a chance to improve that. And as long as we don't make big long-term 8-year mistakes on the contracts, like a Mudryk or something like that, we can keep doing this and we can build a dynasty like Liverpool have. But it may come down to like one of those crazy summers where they've got 2 guys that are among the 5 or 10 best players in the world that they've got to figure out how do we sign them before they leave our club. And I think that's just modern football.
Sure. So, I mean, Arsenal do have quite a bit of wiggle room in the squad. Like what you've said there, I completely agree. I kept seeing new names being linked with Arsenal by credible sources. And I thought we're looking at we're up to like 7 guys who Arsenal might want. A goalkeeper, a defender, 2 central midfielders, a left winger, potentially an attacking midfielder and a striker.
Yeah.
But 6 guys out the door already. We'd expect Zinchenko to follow, potentially somebody else. I think they would have tried to move on Gabriel Jesus this summer had he not been injured. Who do you want to focus on here? Because we've talked quite a bit about a guy like Zubimendi, but I do think that Zubimendi is an important signing. Maybe we should talk about what Arsenal needed going into this summer.
You tell me. Okay. Where do you want to start? Because I know you're at least as big a fan as I am.
This is the problem. There are too many things here that I'm really interested to talk about. So I think that I'd like to give a shout out to Billy Carpenter, who I think is one of the best Arsenal writers out there, who obviously writes for Scouted as well. He has produced so many long reads over the course of the season, diagnosing problems with Arsenal and talking about where there's scope for them to improve in future. And he talked about Arsenal's window a couple of years ago when they brought in Havertz and they brought in Rice, and how that felt like they wanted to target space eaters to make sure that the kind of defeat they'd suffered to Manchester City that season never happened again.
Mm-hmm.
And they really did manage to do it. You never see this Arsenal team get tanked anymore.
Nope.
And they've just got a bunch of guys who, even if they're not, amazing, like Mikel Merino is super, super competent, can play a bunch of roles really well, and he is a big physical presence. Now the problem for Arsenal seems to be, how do we consistently break down the deep and mid blocks? These sides that come out against us, they're super physical. They double up on us out in the wide spaces. What do we do to break them down? So from my point of view, I felt like the things Arsenal needed this summer, they needed a real dribbler who could play on the left, because this team has kind of become low on dribblers.
Yeah.
Like Saka was the only guy last season who averaged over 1.4 dribbles per 90. And as well, if you can get a left winger who can be more of a creative presence too, then that would be good. You don't have to get rid of Martinelli, as much as a load of Arsenal fans seem to have an issue with him. But having somebody out there who can take advantage of the space that the right side bias of Nørgaard and Saka brings, and who is also capable of playing some balls for Saka to make runs to the back post. It would be nice to see Saka's goal-scoring instincts actually rewarded. So those are a couple of things. I also think explosive pace feels like this Arsenal team is quick across the board, but maybe not top-end quick, at least with Saka not fully trusting his hamstring over the last year or so. And then a few other things, I think this Arsenal team need some guys who can just rip shots quickly with relatively little space, some good ball strikers from the top of the box. It feels like quite often Arsenal have a load of guys who need perfect conditions to get a shot off in traffic. And as a result, their shots really, really slumped this season. And when we come onto their forwards, it does feel like let's just add some more shots is definitely an idea they've had. So those are a few things. But what did you think about Arsenal's needs going into this summer, Ted?
I think that they definitely need to free up the attack a bit. And the question is how to do that, right? And it's not simply with better attackers. It starts with Mikel. It starts with Arteta basically needing to learn that he needs to let the boys hunt more often, especially against slightly weaker teams. They're so concerned with control and keeping things tight, but they are a physical mismatch for almost everybody out there in the world. They've built a squad that looks like that. I think that's to their credit, although occasionally it causes them to miss out on either highly technical players or highly pacey players that might not be as bulky in a set piece game. Usually, like one of the ways that teams like Arsenal, the technical teams, can help break down teams in deep blocks is via the set pieces. And they had good success up until a certain point. They can continue to have success in that. Like this is a sustainable edge that we built when I was at Midtjylland, and they've sustained it for many, many years. So that is going to pay off for them. The question then becomes, in open play, what are they going to do in order to build more chances more often? And for me, when I look at it, I think that, yes, left wing and a creative, versatile left wing, that's a big deal. I would love to see them get more pace up top, which I'm not entirely sure is coming in the rumors. Like there's some level of it, but like super pace versus otherwise. And then I think that the left back situation has been an issue because of like it's not been sustainable. And my favorite replacement as a left 8, which also hits on the points that you talk about, somebody that's really creative as a ball mover, somebody that's creative as a passer but can also strike the ball really well, often has been forced to play that left fullback place because the people that they've had as left fullbacks is just a constant series of injuries across the whole squad. So if I were retooling Arsenal as it currently exists, I would love a Rodrygo in the left wide forward position. I think that is, they need to go top of market in order to match Saka and make it so that teams cannot overplay one side or the other. And I love the idea of Myles Lewis-Skelly as the left 8 because he's so dynamic in ball movement and he's such a problematic mismatch, but he's also quite a good tackler and quite a dogged defender. I think that he unlocks so many things on that side that helps balance out the right. I think that's Arsenal's future. Whether that's their future this season or not is a bigger question.
Yeah, it feels like they've kind of, with Zubamendi, it feels like they've committed to Rice being the left eight, right? But clearly, the idea, you often see it kind of in English football media, this idea of what's this team's best 11. And that just feels like such an outdated idea at this stage, right? These managers are going to mix and match. And I think that last season, I do think Arteta was far too conservative. I definitely think that was the case. Obviously suffered from availability issues with Nørgaard and Saka. But also, I think Calafiori and White were big misses at big stage of the season. Arsenal, for much of the season, had to run out their two stability fullback options, right? In Timber and Lewis-Skelly, rather than their attacking options in White and Calafiori. And I think Calafiori, I would like to see him get a run in this team at left back, because he is the element of chaos that often it feels this Arsenal side needs. He's like Darwin Núñez as a left back. And Arsenal definitely need that, right? We've been talking about this, that if everything gets too programmatic, then yes, Arteta can mitigate risk and he has more control, but also teams know what to expect. And like you say, with Myles Lewis-Skelly, the way that he can wriggle out of pressure, and we saw it multiple times in the Champions League. And teams just suddenly, against Real Madrid, against PSG, they honestly had no idea what to do, because suddenly he was in tons of space and he's faster than you think and he's stronger than you think and he can pick a pass. I would really love to see that as well.
And he's on the left side. And when you combine that with the same sort of chaos on the right side and what Saka causes, and then the ability of certain of their players to pick a pass, if you've got somebody that can run in behind over on that side too, you cannot overplay and overcommit. And it just opens up so much of the pitch. And opening up the pitch is the key to scoring more goals, especially when you have elite technical players. So we're kind of talking about things from a tactical perspective and a team that we understand really well. But I think Lewis-Skelly is actually, as long as he stays healthy, is possibly one of the biggest unlocks that we've seen for an Arsenal attack since Bukayo Saka, but it happens in the middle of the pitch, which is unusual. So they have to find a way to get comfortable getting these players in the right spots. Now, it could be that Lewis-Skelly from minute 60 onward, if they shuffle things around, is the right choice as well as a middle eight, depending on what they need. He's the type of player that can, again, like as the game opens up, if they've got a goal, somebody's chasing, like you let him cause chaos along with the two wide forwards. And that then means that teams that are sort of pushing forward and trying to get a goal, like they cannot do it anymore because there are just too many threats to them. And I don't think it's been talked about. And I think I'm kind of excited about it in the same way that I get excited about certain tactical wrinkles with Liverpool's new setup and some of the weapons they've got, like a Jeremy Frimpong, and in that, like, he doesn't fit a traditional role, or he's been played in a different position, but he does have other abilities that teams will fear.
And I think the great thing about Lewis-Skelly is that it feels like Arteta recognizes the kind of talent he is. Pretty much from the first game he started, it was shocking that Arteta was giving him freedom to dribble from very, very deep areas. And
he might not have been. He might have just been
he might have just done it. but that would be interesting. And then, obviously when Rice came to Arsenal, he was also linked with Man City that summer. And there was talk that they wanted him to do that Stones role of sometimes you're a centre-back and sometimes you're a midfielder. Well, maybe then we get Arsenal playing a sort of situational back three where Rice drops between the centre-backs and Lewis-Skelly goes forward. Like, Arsenal have now got a squad of guys who can do lots and lots of different things, who are all very intelligent. I mean, that's very intelligent, very technical. And like I said, while few of them may be super, super fast, everybody feels like they're above average speed, which is such a sea change from the late Wenger days when this team got really, really ponderous. And it was kind of, if Oxlade-Chamberlain is injured, then there's not a single guy in this team who can run. So I would like to see that as well. Rodrygo, let's have a quick chat about Rodrygo then, because I agree. And I do think it's funny that the one guy that we say, yes, pay whatever it takes, almost pay like, 75 mil for this guy. He's the biggest slam dunk superstar on the market. Had 11 goal involvements and 0.3 expected goals and assists per 90 minutes last season. Get him in the door. But he is the guy who Arsenal should probably target above all others in attack, right?
Yeah, and the question for Arsenal is once again, like, are we building for now? Are we building for the future? Are we trying to cross those rules, right? Rodrygo gives you a long-term build option. You are definitely paying. Maybe they don't want to pay that now. Maybe they're more excited about other options. But I'm like plenty of times in the dynasty mode of building these teams, you're waiting for somebody else to come available, right? Like say you've got 5 guys over here that like would definitely improve you, and you're like, can we get that guy? Can we get that guy? That guy's never leaving. Maybe he'll be available next year. So let's not ruin our chance to get the the top 5 player in the world by getting a top 50 player in the world and locking ourselves out of that budget, because that's what happens basically. So I feel like if they're able to do that now, they need to, because otherwise, like you either need something next year. You're hoping for Martinelli to sort of finally make that leap, which everybody's on the fence about, including Arsenal's people behind the scenes. It's just a really challenging build process. Maybe they don't have the cash for it. Maybe Rodrygo doesn't want to come, which is possibly more likely. Maybe he's happy to go somewhere else. And then it's all about, second, fifth, 25th, 50th, choice players to fill that slot. And if you can't get somebody that's substantially better, then where should we spend the money instead? And that's kind of what I feel like we have ended up seeing so far this summer with Arsenal. Like you haven't seen all the smoke behind the scenes, although they did have a really interesting rumor about one of your favorite players that is wide forward from Monaco. Didn't like the price on that rumor, but Akliouche was definitely tagged recently, and you and I both flagged him for other rebuilds elsewhere, including Liverpool. So
yeah. I've got to say, actually, Arsenal, there are a lot of players that we're going to talk about today who don't make me that excited. But Arsenal have targeted a bunch of guys that do. I agree about Rodrygo. I think Rodrygo, go for it. Yeah, Akliouche is an interesting one because we might as well deal with all of these together. It seems like Arsenal want a winger, but also they might be open to a second winger or an attacking midfielder. There have been rumors about Eberechi Eze, and there have been rumors about Akliouche. And Akliouche, considerably younger, 23 years old. You don't quite know what's happening in his numbers because of, Hooterball, which tends to juice some of the attackers a little bit.
does.
But he kind of pops in everything. I mean, he
can
really
press
does.
as well, plays in a physical league. Like the one thing you know about Ligue 1 is it's physical. You don't always know about the technical level. Like sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. But like physicality is not a question in that league, and same with Ligue 2 actually, which is one reason why we've seen so many players come from those leagues and then immediately translate to the Premier League, even if they were like unheard of before. They're like, oh, this guy looks like he fits perfectly, and so when you see that, you're like, okay, that's quite intriguing. And then the question is like projection. So this is what he looks like over there. How's he going to fit inside of our team tactically? Is he good enough technically? And then, how much are his numbers going to decrease via the Premier League being just a better league overall versus, he's still young enough that he could have a couple of ticks upwards.
Well, and the other factor here is that Arsenal are in the middle of this negotiation with Nwaneri, right? Yep. And Nwaneri supposedly is seeking guarantees of game time, which is kind of smart. Like, I mean, I don't know how much you're going to get it, like, but it's at least something that you'd want to talk to the club about and say, do you have a plan for how you're going to develop me?
Because I've seen what happened with Reece Nelson, I've seen what happened with most of the players from the last generation of Hale End that came through, and then Mikel didn't play them, and I have a problem with that.
Yeah, and I mean, he was excellent in limited minutes last season. Like, he offered a load of the stuff we talked about at the top, right? He has something like 3.7 dribbles per 90. This is only about 10 90s. He can rip shots from pretty much
ball striking.
Any zone. Mikel Arteta has said maybe he can play attacking midfield, maybe he can play right wing, maybe he can play up front. We're open to any of these things. Well, when you're trying to negotiate a contract like this, and guys like Akliouche are getting quoted at 70 million euros, and Eberechi Eze is being quoted at 68 million pounds, or that's his release clause supposedly. You've got to factor in the cost here that Nwaneri could vanish as well, right? I
think that for a really young player like this, you can either play on a Champions League side or you can get guarantees of playing time. Like that's pretty much how it looks. I don't think it's unfair for him to ask really serious questions, or his agent ask really serious questions about how are you going to use me and how are you not going to derail my career when, I'm sat on the bench for reasons, or you loan me out somewhere that's a mess, which has happened before. But I also don't think that he's quite at the level to say that, oh, he's definitely going to be like a long-term, top tier player. I like him a lot, and his age suggests that he very much is. But I also think that he's like 1 year of 2090s proving himself at quite a good level to then say, okay, definitely he's involved with the squad from here forward.
Hmm. I think my message there would be, if you are related to Ethan and Nwaneri, you better learn to code, buddy, because we've just seen this, right, with Myles Lewis-Skelly, that he used his mum, who I think is his agent, like teamed up with data guys so that they
Yeah.
could negotiate this contract, and said, like, look at all this stuff he does, look how unusual he is, look at what he's contributed to this team at such a young age. And so it does feel like, for a load of these guys, what's going to separate how good their career is, at least in the early stages, is going to be how smart their parents are when it comes to this kind of stuff.
Yeah, the Analytics FC guys get a lot of flowers for that, and they are probably the most prominent ones that don't have NDAs where they can't talk about it up front. At Saspon, we used to do this regularly as well. We haven't done it currently inside of like the transfer flow window, but we certainly are capable of doing the consulting on this, because players deserve to know where they fit. Raheem Sterling was one of the first ones that kind of came as a very young player. He was looking at a Liverpool contract, and at the age that he deserved to be paid much more than most younger players would have, like at age 22 or something like that, because he's got such a long history of being outstanding at a very high level. And so these players need to know when they're younger, what should I be shooting for? What are the ranges of things? How do I argue back against someone just saying, hey, this is what an academy level contract looks like? It's like, well, you're 18 or 19 years old. You're playing in the Champions League regularly. Like, you probably do deserve a pretty significant bump. And also, the thing that we like to do was we'd like to argue for escalators based off of playing time. So it's like, look, if I'm a proven player that's regularly getting time, like my base salary needs to go up this. And so you get like little ladder base salary raises, because you are a player that needs to, or that is incorporated in the squad and getting lots of playing time. Your value is actually at that point pretty clear.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to ask you about that because, it's my podcast. I don't give a shit. Okay. I don't need a reason. Okay, so let's go back to Arsenal's transfer targets. Let's say they get or target Rodrygo on the left. Let's take these other attackers who are not strikers altogether, because we've seen the Akliouche rumor. We're also seeing quite serious stuff on the Eze side. And then we've also got Noni Madueke, who's been quite heavily linked. Supposedly Arsenal have discussed some personal terms, which, it's one of those things where technically they shouldn't be able to do that, but they have.
That's not how football works.
Yeah, and now they might talk to Chelsea about it. These are interesting players, and we've talked a little bit about Akliouche there. Very exciting. Question is, how does he translate? Let's talk about Eze next. 27 years old. 16 goal involvements last year from 15 expected goals. He could cover left wing. I do think he's slightly better covering left wing than maybe some people would expect. I think he's okay out there, but he would be real attacking midfield cover. However, this is not a cover type price.
No.
This is a starter type price.
It's not. And I feel like every 3 years we see something come through Palace that has the exact same thing and a different player, right? Like, they have a zone mover that's coming there. He's an English national team player for reasons, and they found him as like 20-year-old out of the championship and blah blah blah, right? Zaha was a slightly different one, but the exact same argument over and over again. And then somebody's like, well, this player on a better team deserves like a top tier salary, and he's going to be like a big transfer fee. And it never pays off that way. Like, Olise is different in that he was quite a bit younger, and actually he had a different profile than what Eze and Zaha do. And if it were a 35 or 40 million pound deal, you'd be like, sure, we can add him as part of the squad and in the rotation. He's going to give us lots of options. He's going to cause chaos even if we need to bring him on as a sub. You're paying first team starting 11 prices for him at a Champions League level, and you're like, does that fit? And the answer is not quite. Like, he's good at a lot of things, and he would improve elements around Arsenal that probably they don't have right now, again, on the left side. But are you excited by it versus the price? No. And so if you're not excited by it versus the price, you need to be really cautious, because it locks you into an eventual cap hell, especially as this player is older, and explosive players tend to age less well as they get towards their 30s.
Yeah, agreed. I don't really see what's in this one for
I
Arsenal.
I think that Palace would happily move him on, and I think that
Sure.
his agent would happily have him sign a nice deal somewhere else. And so I think that that's what the noise is from. But you know, stranger things have happened, and I think that Arsenal are a little bit practical this summer. So that's another reason why you're seeing all these names, that some of them you're like, ooh, that's a long shot chance, but I'm intrigued by the youth player there, or that is a player that's 27 right now, but could help him win in the next 2 years. And then what happens in the 3 years after that?
And Andrea Berta is known for this as well a little bit, right? That he's kind of like, we have as many irons in fires as we can, and then we see what the numbers are on the table, and we go for that one. We go for the one that we like best when everything is kind of known. It's worth having a conversation, and I do think when you look at Eze, you can see how he would be very useful for Arsenal to have, especially in games where they expect to have all the territory, and especially if they maybe think Odegaard is going to get injured again. But equally, they're targeting a striker, so we'd expect to see some midfield minutes probably for Kai Havertz, because Arteta loves Kai Havertz. Nwaneri might get some minutes in attacking midfield. Arsenal are talking up Max Dowman as well, who's extremely young, but at some point they'll have to start giving him minutes if they take him seriously, even if it's just in cups.
He's got to go on loan. He's
Sure.
got to. He's got to get
boy.
lots of time playing against real men, so that he can he can figure out, like, can he hang at that level or not, with real stakes on the line.
But the other thing though is that Saka kind of became the creative hub of this team last season when he was playing. We saw his creative numbers really, really pop. And if Arsenal did target somebody who could play on the right as well, it'd be quite interesting to see Saka get some more minutes in a central zone. I'd be quite intrigued. I can imagine a load of defenses expecting Saka to start on the right-hand side, being absolutely terrified to see him in the middle. And of course, as you said, Myles Lewis-Skelly, players like this, we understand that Myles Lewis-Skelly was not bothered about positional guarantees in his contract, right? Because he knows that whether he plays in midfield or whether he plays left back, actually where he spends a load of his time as a player is going to be quite similar, right?
I think of this in the last 30 minutes of a game. Think of Saka either on the wide right space or on the inside, and then Nwaneri in one of those two spots as well. Lewis-Skelly in the sort of middle left channel, and then Rodrygo in the far left channel, or Martinelli. That's horrifying for defenses. You're just like, no, that's too fast. And like, those guys all know how to keep their head up, like that. And a couple of those guys are damn good ball strikers as well. Like, how do we overplay any of that? It's great, right? As long as they can make sure that the defensive stability is there. And those are the types of problems that you're trying to create for defenses as someone who builds a squad. What you're talking about is quite interesting in that, some of those players are ones that may be able to actually help break down a deep block. Like Odegaard consistently is so good at the passing that he's like that. Ozil for a long time was like that after he lost his legs, but in his Real Madrid days, he was as much of a counterattacking player like a KDB was for a long time as well. You're building different elements and you're trying to find, okay, against this type of team that plays defensive here, this is what we got against this type of team we have there. You're trying to create, again, Arsenal love options. Havertz is another option. But Havertz doesn't have those things that those other players do. He's going to give you a 7 most of the time in either of his two positions. He's not going to give you 9s almost any time.
But then it's nice that Arsenal would have another kind of threat there too, right? You can imagine Arsenal chasing a goal late in games, and suddenly you've got Rice and Havertz and potentially Rodrygo, who's sneakily kind of good in the air. Like, he's got a good jump on him. All those guys attacking crosses from the right, from the Odegaard Saka axis. I mean, there's a bunch of ways that this Arsenal team can go on to be extremely dangerous.
Are we talking in ourselves into being like too optimistic right now? I feel like we are. I feel like this is like too hype.
Arsenal are gonna be good next season.
Okay.
That's basically the situation, right? This last season felt like it went about as badly as it could have gone, really.
Yes.
In terms of points total, in terms of the injuries they got and how long they were. They still made the Champions League semi-final with Mikel Merino playing up front. And now it does seem like there are lots and lots of interesting players available. And with guys like Rodrygo, who are the rivals? Chelsea have got out and got a left winger. Manchester United are not seriously in that conversation. City have already brought in Marmoush in January. PSG have been linked in the last week, but if there's a team in the world that does not need another winger,
do you want to swap Rodrygo with Barcola? Like, can we do that? Like, I'm on it.
Exactly. Like, if that happens, then Arsenal got plenty of options. So Arsenal are in a pretty strong position this summer with a bunch of these guys like looking to leave their clubs. Arsenal having a ton of money and a ton of squad space. So Eze, not that excited. Agree with that. Look, if Arsenal sign him, I'm sure it'll be very, very fun, and some fun is always good. What do you think about Noni Madueke? Because I kind of love this player, and I think this is a market opportunity. So Ashwin Rahman recently wrote a piece on Scouted Football about him, about how he was due an explosion, and it was nice for me as a kind of sanity check to see somebody whose opinion I respected saying what I feel about Noni Madueke, who this last season he had 10 goal involvements off 14 expected goals, 0.6 expected goals and assists per 90, but there's so much other stuff in his numbers, right? He's at like 3.5 shots a game. He's at 8 touches in the penalty area. He had his lowest dribbling numbers in a season, but he was carrying into the penalty area at an absolutely insane rate. I mean, like
98th percentile in dribble and carry on ball value. Like,
woof.
It was super noticeable when he was not in Chelsea's lineup.
Yes.
As somebody who watched Chelsea and was critical about some elements, like he was one of the players that you just, when he was on and he wasn't exhausted, he was really, really good. And they missed him. I think Chelsea have these issues where, like we predicted last summer, they need to sell a bunch of guys and they have a limited window. And in fact, UEFA has also said you need to sell a bunch of guys.
Yeah.
And so they got guys to sell. This is one that I wouldn't be excited to sell. A bit like, United and Garnacho. Like if you're selling Garnacho for any other reason than like he's a pain in the ass, like you'll be buying a player that looked like Garnacho. And so like you're just hoping that he fits into the dressing room better. Madueke, we believe, fits in just fine. 97th percentile of expected goals for his position, so sort of a wide forward, 96th percentile in shots, and 98th percentile in dribble and carry OBV. He's not always setting up his teammates as well as he could or should, but the rest of it is exceptional. I like him. The price depends, obviously. And then it's just a confusing move by Chelsea, who I guess feel like they've got other options, or they just desperately needed to get some guys off the books to qualify for the UEFA thing.
Yeah, they need to sell to register, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. Madueke would be one of the last guys. So, I mean, I guess unless Maresca doesn't really like him, like I don't know, I probably would pick Madueke over Maresca. But feels like,
did Madueke play for Maresca when he was in the City youth teams? That seems to be the qualifying criteria for Chelsea's recent moves.
Sure. I mean, look, I think that this would be a really exciting one, an interesting one though, because obviously he does play on the right. Arsenal do need someone who could take some minutes off Saka. But if you see a path for using Saka elsewhere, and who knows, maybe a bunch of clubs are looking at PSG this season, as we talked about, and are thinking maybe Saka is our Ousmane Dembele. Maybe we can try something like that. Maybe Nwaneri is going to be a striker.
I think maybe you play him on the left as well. Like Saka is 2-footed enough that I think he actually can kind of more than get away with that. And he also causes more problems. So if you're like, look, we can't get a top tier right wide forward. Rodrygo's off the list. There's nobody else we love. We can get another flip it around. Can't get a top tier left wide forward, but we can get another really good right wide forward. So we're just going to give ourselves a little more options and try things, as long as we're not overpaying, right? And if you get Madueke at 50 million or whatever the actual price was, like you could probably move him on to like half of the Premier League in a not too distant period of time if he's still pretty good, because he's in his prime peak age, teams like him, or you could sort of move him over and not take much of a loss to one of the top tier Champions League teams across Europe, because they also like the profile of the player and he is really good. So I think that one has less risk, and it's really about maximizing Arsenal's squad and who's fitting where, while also knowing that they're gonna fail at some recruitment somewhere, and it could be this sort of like far attacker.
I think that this is one that I'd be tempted to go to. I mean, when you mentioned 50 million there, would you actually be willing to go that high, or would you only go that high if you did miss out on someone like Rodrygo?
I mean, I think that he's probably he's close. He's right around that. I mean, am I more excited about Madueke or Eze? Like, I'm more excited about Madueke. I think that's where I'm at for that one. Yeah, I mean, this is For us, it's fun. For Arsenal, they're like, oh, we got all these headaches. We got 99 problems, but Saka ain't one.
Well, I think that we're going to come on to that in a minute because we're getting closer to the striker spot. But yeah, Madueke is 6 months younger than Saka, and I just look at his numbers and I think, yeah, this guy rocks. And every time I watch him on the pitch, I think he's a problem. He is a problem, and even there are some stylistic similarities, right, in him coming from out of Maresca's Chelsea team from the back half of the season at least, and into this Arsenal side. So I'd be intrigued. I'd be intrigued to see that. And again, big dribble numbers, big carry numbers, as you said. Like, this is something, it does feel like all these guys, what do they have in common? Lots of dribbles, lots of shots. Arsenal probably do need to just rip some more shots. So, with that in mind, we've talked a lot about Arsenal striker options this season. Arsenal fans have got really dialed into this, and I do see why. It's kind of the dominant narrative about Arsenal now. They just need a forward, and of course they just need a clinical forward, as if you can, that's a type that you can just target. But it now looks like it's going to be Victor Gyokeres. It looks like they've decided that's what they're going to do. Supposedly Šeško, they were not budging RB Leipzig beneath their 90 million euro valuation. Loads of striker names on the market this summer. Nobody who like really blows my mind, I've got to say. And Gyökeres doesn't blow my mind, but in that context, with a base price that looks like it could be around 55, 56 million pounds, does this make some sense?
So we need to take this back a little bit, because this is a player that hasn't just played in Portugal. He was in England like 2 years ago. He was at a giant team called Coventry City. And coming out of the championship, he was fine, but he wasn't great. We have this long history of looking at players and the transition from championship to Premier League. And his numbers coming out of the championship at age 24. So he was like just sort of entering his peak seasons then. When we see players who come from the championship up to the Premier League, we typically see them put up about 65 to 80% of their numbers in the higher league. Now, Gyökeres went to Portugal and went from something like, 0.4 across that space up to like 0.8. So like he had a huge double going from the English Championship to Portugal. And when you look at it, you're like, I find that hard to process. I find that hard to like really understand what's going on there. Then you dig into Gyökeres' numbers across his goal scoring in that league, and you find out that something like 31 out of his 39 goals have come against the bottom 11 teams in that league. So very much flat track bully behavior. Now, there's one school of thought that says that Arsenal need more flat track bully. They're very happy to find somebody that's flat track because they want to bully these smaller teams. The problem they find with all of this is that when he has faced competition that has been pretty elite in terms of physicality, which the championship is, whether you think anything about that league, like it is scrappy as fuck. We know that the Premier League is also like that. And then you look at what Gyökeres has done over there against teams that really do have like pretty weak, like they're significantly weak in the bottom half of that league. You're like, I'm not convinced about any of this. So how does this make sense? Now, I have come around to the idea that Arsenal have looked at this market and they know that they need a center forward. Like they can work around the left wide forward, but they know that Gabriel Jesus may not actually play for the club again, or if he does, it's just going to be kind of the tail end of this coming season. In order to compete across all these competitions, they need a dude that is a body that's physically impressive and that can hit the ball real hard and score goals.
Yeah.
Given the practicality of this, and given that they don't see anybody else out there in the market that kind of fits that bill, that's why you're ending up at Gyökeres. You're ending up there because he is the least bad option at a position of need that doesn't completely submarine their options to move forward after this. That is the only way I can make this make sense, because he doesn't make sense from an age profile. His data profile is really kind of choppy and up and down. And when you scout him and you look at the numbers of where he scored his goals, like historically, you're like, it's against teams that are weak.
Yeah.
There's nothing that adds up to this is a slam dunk. This is great. Usually we see Arsenal's recruitment team do that. We very rarely see them fuck up. But in this case, you're like, this isn't a gamble. This isn't we're excited about this. This is, we have a position of need and we have to find someone, and this is the least bad option on the market.
Yeah, so I think viewed through that lens, it's hard for it to be a huge fuck up. I think a load of Arsenal fans who are talking themselves into it being like a superstar addition, I think might be disappointed. Not least because Mikel Arteta is still going to use Kai Havertz up front a lot of the time. And actually, in Arsenal's defense, if Gyökeres comes and he's not tremendous, then there were times last season, very few times last season, but quite a few the season before, where Arsenal had their first choice wingers plus Rodrygo plus Havertz all on the pitch at the same time. And when that happened, the attack was pretty damn good.
Yeah.
And if they can do that plus one of Calafiori and White, or plus someone like Lewis-Skelly pushing forward in the left 8 space, this is still a team that's going to be exceptionally hard to defend. And last season, they were able to get chances for whoever played up front. I do think if Gyökeres plays up front, he'll get a reasonable number of goals. The question is, does he get those difference-making goals? Yeah, that is the problem. But Šeško at 90 million euros, Šeško's a physical unicorn, but low shots, his numbers took a step back this season. Like, there are question marks there. Has also played a lot in transition too. Someone like Osimhen apparently asking for absolutely insane wages. Someone like Ollie Watkins, far too expensive for the age. Like, there are every single guy out there has at least one major question mark against them. And so I have very big question marks against Gyökeres, but then I look at the other options and I think, well, if it signs somebody, then they're going to be imperfect. Even Ekitike, who I know Kim has been really positive about in the newsletter, for Arsenal, like the way that he would be required to play, I think he's probably a little bit too slight. He wants to dribble into space as well. So,
do you want to pay 80 to 85 million for
exactly.
Ekitike, right? Like, no, you want to find somebody that's in the 30 to 40 range and hope that they continue to mature. That's the one reason why I thought Delap made a lot of sense, right? Like, if you brought him in, if he failed, then there's like almost no risk. And if he continues to mature and he plays better with better players around him, then like that's actually quite exciting. You might just say that Gyökeres is the other side of the Delap trade, where like he's a bit more expensive. You know that he's proven himself like in Europe, and that's fine. But like, don't expect anything better than what you've seen before, and don't even expect the levels of goal scoring that he had in Portugal. Expect him to be like a slightly above average Premier League forward. If we, there were some projections by some of the stats accounts, including Scott Willis and Michael Cayley was in the tweet thread or the Blue Sky thread as well, basically saying, yeah, I think 0.45 goals per 90 is, roundabout where we might expect Gyökeres this next year. And then I looked at the expected goals for that, and that put him like basically 6th in line with Ishak, who scored above his expected goals because he was really good finisher. So it's not the end of the world, right? If Arsenal had the 5th or 6th best forward as a center forward, and then everybody else in the squad was top tier, you'd be like, yeah, we could expect things to be pretty good. As opposed to this last season where you're looking at 10th, 12th, 15th, like it was not great. And so, like, yes, can you build a better squad that gets results and doesn't make you wince all the time, and make sure that you don't have a big hole that you have to fill with a midfielder, which is not ideal, even if Marino won some plaudits for that last year. That's what they're faced with. And sometimes you just have to be hyper practical and say, yeah, we think we've got a team that might be able to win it in 20% of our simulations, as long as we've got a center forward that is competent and say 80th percentile.
So if Arsenal close that deal and they get in, they've got Kepa, Nørgaard, Zubimendi, Mosquera or a centre back, Rodrygo, Gyökeres, and maybe another attacker. That's an awful lot of players to bring in one summer, and quite a few starters in there as well. Should we expect that Arsenal would be able to just bring those guys in and transition fairly seamlessly, or would we expect there also to be teething problems?
I think if they go fast, like if they get them in the next couple of weeks and have like 3-4 weeks more, they're fine. Especially given that like Nørgaard looks like it might happen very soon, already knows the league. Like, this is one area where knowing the league is sort of somewhat valuable. And also he's not like, your number one starter that has to like hold the ball all the time. Like, he's going to be your second option that you rely on to fill out minutes and depth. I think it's pretty exciting. And I think that they were definitely the second best team last year, almost like despite themselves in some cases. Like there were all the things that could have gone wrong. If you add a bit more improvement in the things that you're getting rid of, and we don't think Arsenal are getting rid of anybody like super significant to the squad, you're just able to ratchet that up a bit more, and you don't have the injuries. Like they could be back on that 80 plus point pace without too much difficulty. Now, the complication is the league keeps getting better and it keeps getting deeper. And so there will be more variation based off of, just teams beating you because they have more skill and not necessarily because you've bombarded them and you got unlucky.
Okay, so I'm quite optimistic about this. Like, I don't love all these moves, but I do think that this is a really solid set of moves, and I do think that the guys doing recruitment at Arsenal obviously know what they're doing at this stage and have a pretty clear remit for this summer. Is there anything that you think they're missing with these targets? Is there anything that you think? Is there anywhere where you feel like they're kind of misprofiling, or they're maybe like missing a trick by getting fixated on one kind of player?
I don't think so. I actually think they've done a good job. I would have done some different things last summer that would have given them different options. Like obviously, we don't know what the real story was, but I was very high on Ruiz, who managed to win a Champions League title over at PSG. So he's probably very happy he didn't come. And I'm not sure I would have moved for Calafiori, given that we knew that there were potential issues flagged in his earlier physicals in Italy that meant that he might not be as resilient as they might need, which would have then opened them up to like a De Kuipers this summer, which would then give you like another really good attacking, creative passing option at a left back. But given where they're at, I think that this is a very strong set of options. I think the squad is good. They're not the richest team in the Premier League. They have done a good job of kind of maintaining some level of fiscal responsibility, unlike other places that have been bankrolled and lots of write-offs and from their ownership. So yeah, Arsenal fans like tearing their hair out so that they look like me, but they had hair before this last season when they finished second. But the reality is you've got a good coach who continues to learn. You've got an ownership that seems to be pretty switched on at this point, especially given where they were 5 years ago. And the squad is excellent. Everything here says that if they get a bit of luck, maybe a little bit like Liverpool did last year, like they should be a real contender across multiple different competitions at the top of the Premier League and Europe.
Yeah, I think it's an exciting time for Arsenal fans. And look, if there's a rumor that you've seen about Arsenal, don't worry. If it ends up coming to pass this summer, we will talk about it. We've done all these rebuilds over the last few weeks, but that doesn't mean that we're finished with these clubs. We will talk about moves as and when they're made. But that is our Arsenal rebuild for today. Make sure that you check out the newsletter as well, as always.
Ooh. We did a promo for our top 5 takes that you might want to check out as well. So if you're new to the show and you haven't seen as much, we did our top 5 takes from last season. We were way ahead, months ahead on some of these things. And some of them were like pretty out of left field. Patrick managed to nail like all the Champions League quarterfinalists, every single one. Bam, bam, bam. Which,
really?
Professional gambler, he might not be, but he's got a future there somehow.
Thank you. Yeah, these are our best takes, not our spiciest takes.
No, true.
Yeah, we'll save those for another. You can catch those over on Man Down, I think. Yes, do check out the newsletter. Thank you very much. We're over 20,000 subscribers. We continue to grow on the newsletter. The newsletter's banging, and we've been really excited as well by the response to these rebuilds, both as audio podcasts and on YouTube. Please do like and subscribe if you haven't done already. And send in your questions. Drop them in the comments below. We're always excited to hear from you. Ted, anything you want to say before we get out of here?
No, I'm stoked. We still got a couple more rebuilds to come. And if you haven't seen the rebuilds, we're going to link them in the show notes. So like check them out and tell your friends if you think they're good, because everybody else seems to. So why not?
Thank you very much. Bye-bye. How was your break? You said it was good. You said your son enjoyed New York.
Yeah, my son and I really enjoyed New York, and he came away from it. So he met a lot of my New York friends, which most of my family had not ever met. This is for time in New York. It was fun to do some tourist stuff with people, or with a kid that had kind of like clear eyes. Like his interactions with New York City have basically been via the Spider-Man video games.
Oh, sure.
Which is awesome. But and he's like, this is the best food trip I've ever taken. And we didn't like crush it and blow out like tons of food. We just hit like all of the classic hits and the good stuff because New York has that too.
What kind of food is he particularly excited about?
Steak. We did have like a big thing of A5 Wagyu the first night, but we rocked like classic bagels. We had awesome tacos, awesome pizza. We had one night that was just like a burger place that was around the corner from our hotel. And he's like, this is way better than it should be. So yeah, I don't know. He loved it. And that was great to see because yeah, he sees a lot of what I love about that city. And also like, he's like, oh, I see why you'd like to move here at some point, especially given like how many friends you have. I was like, yeah, but you know, it's really nice weather this summer in Bath. So I'm not complaining about that either.
Sure.
Oh, I was going to tell you.
Oh, go on.
It happened to me again last week in therapy. Remember the thing where we were talking about where like I came in sort of like saying something or having an opinion, and then my therapist repeated it back to me, like agreeing with me, and I was like, ooh, I'm not sure if you can. Like it happened again, and I caught it. And she's like, what did you just do there? I was like, oh God, Patrick and I just talked about this on a Man Down podcast. And he really wanted to dig in on it and press on it because he's like, what are you doing? I was like, guess we should start thinking about this because it happens.
Oh, your poor therapist. Like my therapist, I think she must have, when I told her I was training to be a therapist, she must have been like, oh my fucking God. Like, I'm amazed she didn't immediately just like double my fee.
She's great. And we have like a really good rapport and she helps me a lot. And this last week in particular, so if you're not listening to Man Down, like we talk about lots of different stuff, but like the origins of Man Down go back to some shit that happened in my life over basically the past year, and some reasons why like I felt like we needed to talk about being vulnerable and go through all these topics that are really useful for people. Recently, the feedback has been super strong on stuff like having hard conversations, which people are like, oh my God, this has been helpful to me in so many different ways. You don't even know. But we've tried to build like a series of topics around that. Anyway, I was talking to her and I said, this is one of the first times in I don't know how long that I felt like I've been able to deeply love myself. I've been comfortable with that because I looked back and I realized that I've been, even during the really hard times over the last year, I have treated the people in my life with like a gentleness and a love that has, given the hard times, should be extremely difficult. And it is very much the embodiment of who I want to be. And I said, because of this, I feel very warm towards myself, which has been really, really hard for me for quite a while. And she's like, well, that's lovely. And I'm so happy that I've been able to like help you with that. And I was like, I am too, because it feels a lot better than I did earlier. Yeah. Anyway, sorry. I don't mean to derail it, but I wanted to tell you because you haven't been around and I thought it was really exciting.
No, it is exciting, man. Like, I mean, it does feel like it's the ultimate goal. Like quite often in therapy, we're talking about this or that, but ultimately you do think that if you could be okay with yourself, even it doesn't even have to go as far as to like love yourself, but if you're okay with yourself, then half the issues that we'd be talking about in therapy would just kind of evaporate.
Yeah, and it's genuinely hard to do, and I don't hold it for that long. Like I'm not like enlightened, but it was just one of those times where I was like, oh wow, I really appreciate kind of where I've been and how much I keep pushing back to like the good space, because the world takes that away from us over and over again. And so it's not like you can get there and stay there. It's like the tide just trying to constantly take that stuff back out to sea. And yeah, it's a challenge. Unlike, those days when I had 2 little kids and like survival was the only thing that we were doing, that you don't get a chance to like have the time and the energy to do it. So I really respect what you just did on your holiday.
I mean, you'd respect it less if you saw it,
No.
It's one of those things where you're just like, I don't know. It helps, I think, when you know people who are really struggling to have kids. Like anything basically that makes you more appreciative of how things are. And I am very appreciative of my children, but like you get to those moments on holiday when you've been on holiday for a week and you're boiling hot and you're just like losing your mind, or on the journey home where we had car, plane, train, 15 minutes into the car, one child is sick, half an hour later the other child is sick, and I was like, we've got a whole day of this ahead.
Oh God.
But yeah, we're all still kind of readjusting at the moment, and it's a big part of it. I think is just like, can I parent, like, not in a way that is perfect, because that's not going to happen, but can I parent in a way that I'm not going to be horribly ashamed of myself for later? Like, I mean, that is honestly a daily struggle, right? Like, that is kind of like flexing a muscle. I never realized that it would be like that I would actually have to exert energy to do it.
So when I'm telling you, having been in your place and survived this same sort of thing, when I'm telling you that I respect and appreciate what you just did, I'm being totally sincere about that, because I have full empathy. I had 2 kids 14 months apart. I was not good at it. Like, these were our first 2 kids, and it was hard. And there were times when I go back to work, I was like, thank fuck I am back at work. Which is not the thing that you want to look back at and say, oh, well, that means I was a good parent and I was fully engaged and awake and aware. But again, like, there are times when, like, your highest level is simply surviving and making sure that your kids are in good shape and you've not been horrible to them. And again, this is where, like, reattaching to baselines, which we do all the time in soccer or in gambling, is really useful as a human, because if you don't know what normal looks like, you're like, oh, I'm failing all the time. But if you do know what normal looks like, if you know what average looks like, if you know what a good outcome looks like, then you can be like, actually, this is probably about the best that we can do and still have, like, a diverse lifestyle, or for me to maintain my sanity, because that's the only balance that I can find. And so take the compliment and take the appreciation for you.
Thank you. I am kind of glad the holiday's over.
Yeah.
It is easier to go to work.
And on that note, we get to talk about Arsenal today, which is fucking fun. Now, you bastards in the comment have no excuse for complaining about us talking about Arsenal.
No, they'll say Knutson just spent the 5 minutes at the end of this podcast talking about how much he loves himself, as if we didn't know. That'll be the angle.
Thank you, troll Patrick, for preparing me for my future life as in the comments.
I've been on YouTube for 10 years. Like, I know the angles at this point.
Well, we have a whole other podcast that talks about how difficult this actually is, and how much work can be helpful to it, because you should go through life, learning to appreciate yourself and be the embodiment of who you want to be and the change you want to see in the world. I think that's valuable.